Hello, it's Greg Grizzled and Gaijin. We're back. We hope you're having a happy day wherever you're listening to this audio content from. As always, I'd like to thank you for your continued support of Greg Grizzled and Gaijin social media and writing efforts. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a special unnumbered episode of the Greg Grizzled and Gaijin, definitely not a podcast show. A light and fluffy look at social media, Japan, Japanese food, expat life, and life in general. As always, your retweets of this and all the wonderful, wonderful content that we actively tweet and retweet out on Craig Hoffman 11 on Twitter is appreciated. Thank you in advance for helping us get the good word out about Greg Grizzled and Gaijin. Have a little time here before I head back to the salt mines after the new year in 2019. People have sent in several questions about resumes and getting English teaching work and a few other related topics to English teaching. I don't spend a lot of time on my blog these days or on my social media talking about English teaching. Two reasons: a lot of my core really isn't interested in that, or there are already people here who have jobs and they're far more interested in improving their blogs, becoming writers, and moving out of that. So that's what, I cater to my core, which is another video, but you have to give people what they want. But there is still a significant amount of Greg Grizzled and Gaijin followers who are interested in English teaching, coming here, improving their lots in life here as English teachers. And so I offer up this video, or rather audio content for them. As always, your retweets of this and other great content that I actively tweet and retweet out on Craig Hoffman 11 on Twitter is appreciated. Start out, a lot of questions about resumes. You can pay people to help you with your resume and improve your chances of getting on the JET program. I know a couple particular sites here in Japan from expats who claim to be able to help you do that. If it's your thing to pony up between $25 to $200 US to do that, that's your choice. For Greg Grizzled and Gaijin engagers, especially followers of Craig Hoffman 11 on Twitter, I do offer free resume and cover letter editing. I'm not going to write it for you. I don't have that kind of time. But I will help you step by step until you reach your dreams of employment. I've done that in my personal life for years, as well as on social media the last couple. So that's up to you. My work is exemplary, and people are highly successful when I help them with their cover letters and resumes. And I have been very, very, very successful in procuring English teaching work here in Japan over the years. So there's that. Let's talk about resumes. The biggest mistake I see on resumes, they're too long. I've been here nearly 14 years. I do have good English teaching jobs. I have significant education. I have some additional diplomas. I have a long writing resume. My resume is 1 page when I apply for English teaching work, and my cover letter is 1 page. The reality is you're not that special, and I've done blog posts about that. Hiring agents early don't really care. It's a question of this person maybe, this person no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And it's just important to keep getting your resume in that yes pile and not the no pile and into the trash. And if I see a long resume that looks like a lot of effort, and you might say, well, that person's trying really hard to get the job. But the reality is, person without a lot of time says, I don't have time for that. And you might be a really great candidate, but get tossed in the trash. Now, in that 1 page, you certainly want to highlight your good points. Education, people spend a lot of time on that. Here's what's important about that you have a 4-year degree in something. Nobody cares where you went to school, and unless really it's an English or ESL related kind of degree, nobody cares what your degree is in. I've helped people with PhDs all the way down to a 4-year degree in theater, lighting, and painting get jobs here in Japan. It's really not that important what the degree is. It is important to be a native speaker of English, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's important to make sure that the information, the contact information on your resume is correct. I get an inordinate amount of resumes with misinformation from the emails and telephone numbers. The address is hit or miss. It's not likely early on that any company here hiring you is going to send you a letter through the snail mail. Things like your email are much more valuable when contacting a prospective applicant. And use an email that you actually use. I've sent emails to people with the email that they put in the resume, and they're really slow to get back to me. Companies don't have that kind of time. If somebody from Japan is contacting you about a position, they're likely interested now, and it behooves you to contact them quickly. So use some contact information that you get alerts and you use regularly. That's a big one. Highlight teaching experience. You can hear that on any number of videos. People like to see that you've had experience with children and people and they didn't die. And that seems blunt, but that's really, really true. Tutoring experience works to a degree. Volunteering is a little less unless it's been extensive. It's great that you're interested in Japanese culture, but I wouldn't go on and on about that. I love Japan is best left for a bumper sticker, not a cover letter. People go on and on about their Japanese ability, but most of them can't prove it with a piece of paper. You can put, I'm upper intermediate, I'm advanced, I'm conversational, but that really means little to a hiring agent unless you have a certificate to prove it, like the JLPT. That's the popular language proficiency test. I'm not saying you can't put that on a resume, and maybe, if somebody's desperate and you put, I'm upper intermediate, you might get an interview over someone who says, I don't speak any Japanese. Don't spend a lot of time on references outside of the JET program. The odds of people calling them, I put references on my resume for a variety of jobs, and one job called them, and that was an in Japan reference, a Japanese person. Nobody has ever contacted the other references that I've ever put on my resume for English teaching work here. Although that being said, a lot of English teaching work here is found by word of mouth. I've gotten volunteer work and language classes back in the old days just from people realizing that Craig was, quote, a good English teacher, end quote, and dependable. So that's far more important. The reality is that if you are flexible and you can move anywhere in Japan, you are likely to get an English teaching job. Now, recently, you see a lot of forums, Reddit and things. I don't spend a lot of time on that. They tend to be rather negative places, but English teaching does not pay what it used to. A lot of reasons for that. People are accepting less money, and the market has shifted such that profits matter for these companies. It doesn't mean you still can't find some good jobs, but the reality is, unless you're on the JET program, and that's a 5-year limit, so there are limits there as far, that's not a career option, you're going to take a hit. I know my first job in Japan paid really, really well, and my second job was a good job, but I took a financial hit, and it was still in the upper echelon of English teaching hits. So, I know a lot of JET program people who enjoy JET and stay on in another English job with especially a dispatch company and paying, for example, full price for your own apartment, and in many cases losing the company matching of health insurance and pension really, really hits them hard. And I even know a fair number of foreigners who kind of skirt that by not paying into the pension. And recently I can tell you that I've seen a lot of articles about the Japanese government coming after people for back pension and insurance payments. So be careful with that. And I know personally a friend who kind of left and didn't pay residence tax and got hit with a huge, huge bill when he decided to come back and move to Japan. He kind of thought the Japanese government would, quote, forget about him, end quote, but they did not. Of that you can be sure. The reality of teaching English, though, it is a grind for most people. You can make a buck or two, but you're probably going to teach a lot. I see a lot of jobs recently that offer more overtime and extra classes within the contract. And if you're a hard-working stiff who likes working long hours, you probably can make a buck. But if you have dreams of really breaking the bank on a 40-hour-a-week job with limited teaching hours, non-JET, that's probably not going to happen, especially if you have limited to no experience teaching English. If it's a really good job, people who have been here a long time probably know about it and have applied for it, and you're up against them. It doesn't mean you can't sneak in sometimes and get a great job. I know a few people who have gotten really good work that way, but it's not the norm. People often ask me what it's like to teach English. I've taught every level, basically, from nursery school all the way to even substituting for some college classes. And for me, I say it often, I'd teach goats if they paid me. I'm not very picky about who sits in front of me while I teach English. And I think that's a key to making money. If you say, well, I'm not going to teach little kids, you've cut yourself out of a lot of the higher paying jobs. If you say, well, I want to teach junior high, that's a popular level for many ALTs, assistant language teachers. You're going to be up against more competition there. And you say, well, I want to teach college, and a lot of those jobs require advanced degrees and certificates and experience that a lot of younger applicants simply don't have. So I guess the advice there is to be open to teaching anywhere at any time, especially nights and weekends. If you're not adverse to teaching nights and weekends, you're certainly going to get a job as a native speaker. I think if you're not a Western native speaker, and I mean no disrespect to anyone, if you're in that, you have to call it something, second level of, quote, native speaker, and I know some really good teachers who aren't, for example, Australian, Canadian, American. There is a bias that exists at times against those applicants, despite whatever certificates and experience they have, and that's unfortunate, but it's not changing. They often have to accept less money or not nearly as good of a working situation, and that's the way it is. And that's kind of filtered back up even to the Western native speaker, who now has to compete with those folks for jobs, and they're kind of forced to accept less money and not as an ideal of working conditions. And you can go on the forums and you can complain about that, but that too isn't changing. I had a foreigner, he said, I didn't save very much money and I can make more money back in my home country. What should I do? And I said, well, go back home to your home country. And he did. And in fact, later he moved to another foreign country, Vietnam, as I recall, and he's making, after expenses, more than he was making here in Japan as an English teaching person. There are more countries in the world who need native speakers of English to teach, and some of them pay much, much, much more money and have much better perks for the job. That's just the way it works. It doesn't mean that you can't find a perky job with some benefits here, but it's getting harder and harder and harder to do. The last question that I'll hit on, someone asked me, if you're going to stay in English teaching for a long time, what advice do you give? And that's difficult. I never expected to teach English for almost 14 years. It's kept my lights on, and that's a credit to some good fortune and hard work on my part. But it loses its allure. As I sit here, I'm consumed by thoughts of returning to my company, which is a pretty good situation, as I've said numerous times. But I'm not thrilled to be going back to that. I can remember a time here in the old days when I was pretty excited to get back to the teaching, but that was a different level and a different situation. It gets a little old, and you have to be prepared to understand that it still might be necessary for you to do that. I do other things. If you've seen me, I write a lot, I blog a lot, I'm pretty popular on Twitter, but at the end of the day, the majority of what keeps my lights on and keeps those I care about happy is in the field of English teaching. The advice would be to be patient, continue to work hard, develop new and broader skill sets that are far more useful to another Japanese company if you're looking to stay, or look for opportunities to move back to your home country and hopefully taking the skill sets that you have earned here as a long-term foreigner and use them to your benefit. At any rate, that's a quick synopsis, and we went a little longer than normal, but I think it was well worth it to help people if we can. That's it, and have a great, great day.